Here's the first thing you should write down, and that is the need to be liked is a weakness. The need to be liked is a weakness. And I see it in my kids now. You know, they do stupid things, and they do stupid things because they want to fit in. They want to be with, you know, we all know that's how a lot of people, good people, get in trouble. They're hanging out with the wrong crowd. They want to be liked. They want to be popular, and they lose their sense of thinking. And as an employer, you are going to have to make tough calls. You know, your employees are not your friends. They're not your family. And if you can cross the line and be too friendly, and that's not good. It's not good for them. It's not good for you. And if you need to be liked, you're going to have a tough time managing people. The thing that I strive for, if you ask my employees, what is it like to work with Robin? What I strive for is she's tough, but she's fair. That's what I want. I want tough, but fair. Not, hey, she's the best boss I've ever worked for. She inspired me. She coached me. I mean, maybe I've done all those things. And I think you do want to educate your employees, and you do want them to, you want to have a productive relationship. But the need to be liked is one that is going to cause you a ton of grief. And if you think about problems you've had in the past, it could be that you did certain things to be liked, to be popular, and it comes back and it bites you in the butt, right? So, I mean, if you look at some of the most successful CEOs, you look at a Bill Gates, you look at Larry Ellison, you look at Steve Jobs, who was notoriously an asshole. You don't have to be liked in order to be effective. Now, I'm not saying you have to be an asshole to be effective either, right? I don't think that excuses bad behavior. But I think that if you need to be liked and you are making decisions because you don't want to confront the person, you don't want to harass the person, you feel like you're micromanaging, you feel like they're swearing about you behind your back, which they are, you know, you're going to have a problem. Because even Mark Randolph will talk, if anyone read his book, he talks about culture, and they were all about perks and whatnot. And him and one of his managers were walking through the office, and they happened to have a hot tub in the office, which he's trying to be nice, trying to be liked, trying to have perks. And there were 2 employees that were sitting in the company hot tub on company time, pissing and moaning about the company and how bad it was, right? No, I'm not even joking. And that's why, you know, the need to be liked is a weakness. You want to be fair. You want to pay well. You want to give people work that's meaningful. That's what the purpose. But everything that you have to do to make the company win, there's going to be a lot of unpopular decisions and things that you're going to have to do. Okay, so just keep that in mind as we go through this. And I think really, if you want to know what's the secret sauce, the number one way to prevent employee problems is to be constantly hiring, or at least running ads for every position, so you're never hiring out of desperation, or you're never being held hostage by a disgruntled, poor performer. Okay? So like, you'll see, by the way, I put cartoons throughout this because this is such a painful topic. I tried to lighten it up as best I could. So you can see the woman is standing there at the hospital saying, he's complaining of chest pain, shortness of breath, cramps, and dizziness. Do you sell earplugs? You know, and so that's one way to get rid of it, is just try to ignore the dysfunction, but a better way is just to replace it, okay? So the most dangerous number in business is 1. And if you think about the reason why you hang on to people that you know are poor performers, will not improve, cannot improve, who have bad attitudes, it's almost always because you can't afford to replace them. Like, you have work that needs to be done, and as dysfunctional as they are, as irritating as they are, as disruptive as they are, you let them hang around because you can't replace them. If you had somebody who was better that you could replace them, how many of you would replace that person in a hot second, right? So just like clients and lead generation, one of the key things to being successful in business is you have constant deal flow, constant leads coming in. That way you don't tolerate poor performance from a client either, because you can replace them. So in order to put yourself in a position of power, you've got to constantly be hiring. Do not wait until you desperately need somebody in order to replace them. Okay, so one of the books I will recommend to you that I think is actually one of the best books on leadership is Jack Welch's book on winning. And one of his principles is, he said this in the book, you want to replace, if you have top performers on your team, you want to be in a position where you can replace them within 8 days or less of them leaving or being fired. Because what it does is it sends a message to everybody in the organization that you are replaceable. So that's your goal. If you think about every top performer in your business, do you have resumes? Do you have underlings that are pretty good that you might give opportunity to step up because they're showing promise, they're working hard, they're doing what they need to do? Could you replace top performers in your business in 8 days or less? And that's a really key thing, and I took that to heart. And that's part of what I'm building my organization now, is that I never want to have one in any position. Now, if a key player left, it's not to say that wouldn't hurt us, and it won't hurt you. But if you can at least limp along with maybe replacing them with a new person or giving somebody a promotion, right? You're in a much better position than if you're just sitting there struggling and desperate. So like all of you say that it's, and look, hiring top talent or hiring good people is difficult. We all know that. Hiring really good top talent is brutal. So if you're not constantly recruiting, running ads, and spending part of your time as CEO of the company looking for those top performers, right? You're handicapped. Because now if somebody misbehaves, and some of them know some of them know they can't be fired. I had a situation once where I had a really good salesperson. She's sitting across from me. She did something, she lied about something to cover something up. And I had a meeting with her, and I said, this is not part of our core values. This is a violation of our core values. And she joked, oh, you won't fire me. You know what I said? Pack up your shit and go right now. That's exactly what I said. And I could do it. See, the key is, I couldn't do it all the time if 10 years ago, because I would be like, shit, I'll lose $1 million in revenue. I don't have anyone to replace them, right? You got to be in a position where when they have, because she happened to verbalize it. They're thinking it. If they know you don't have anybody else, they might not verbalize it. She was stupid enough to verbalize it to me. But you have to be in that position. So I'm telling you right now, if you don't take anything else from this presentation, if you just do this one thing, right? And I think that's the hardest part of being in business. Everyone wants to know, what's the one thing? What's the one thing? The one thing that's the hardest thing is getting everything working, because you can't just be working on marketing or just be working on operations or just be working on, there's a million things that you got to keep going. Hiring and managing, financials, sales, marketing, HR, all this. You have to get all of it kind of working simultaneously, right? But at least carve out some time. You as the leader have to carve out some time to be hiring people. So let me give you some straight talk about employees. And the first thing is, obviously you get what you tolerate. We had a guy who was, he would like sometimes come in a little bit late, not always show up on time, but you could absolutely set your watch to when he left every day, kind of thing, right? And, we mentioned it to him and said, we noticed you're coming in late. And it wasn't every day and it wasn't every week, but it was a little bit. But the real kicker was one day he just decided to go home because he needed a nap. Exactly. And and he didn't tell me, he didn't tell Aaron, who was his manager. He mentioned it to the admin on the way out. So when we went looking for him, we're like, well, where did, Bob go? I'll just use the term Bob. And we didn't know where he went. So Aaron, who's his manager, called him on his cell phone and woke him up, and he was pissed about that. He said, hey, dude, and then he yelled at him for waking him up, So he said, well, you can go back to sleep. I just want to let you know you're fired. Now go back to sleep and don't ever come back here again, So you get what you tolerate. And when people in your organization see poor, bad behavior tolerated, it lowers the standard of everybody else in the organization. And P.S., that includes you. You've got to be the first one in the morning and the last one at night. You've got to be leading. You've got to be doing your job, which is making this company win. And they can see it. Are you growing or are you not growing? Are you improving or are you not improving? Are you doing new initiatives? Are you launching new things? Are you hiring new people? See, when they see that, that's your job. And if they don't see you performing well, then they won't perform well. And you simply get what you tolerate. And it's often, we had this conversation yesterday in Greg Crabtree's Managing for Profitability discussion. We had this conversation where when you go back, maybe not all of you, because you're kind of been in the mix for a while, but when we get people in rapid implementation that are brand new to the toolkit, and they get around a lot of other successful MSPs, they get around me, and we create a bigger future, a bigger vision. We wake them up from mediocrity, and we actually give them some inspiration that they could be better, they could be more profitable, they could have better clients, and they start making this change. One of the things that they have to deal with is going home and dealing with the employees, because the employees don't always welcome that change, right? And the people who get you to 1 million might not get you to 10. And so, because we had this discussion yesterday, one of the people in the group is doing a good job and doing what he's supposed to be doing, and looking at LER, labor efficiency ratios, and going to the techs and saying, there will be no raises because the labor efficiency ratio is lower than it needs to be, and you need to get it up to here, which means you got to improve your utilization, and sharing that with them. That you would think that would be a welcome message, and it is not. And so there may need to be some turnover and firing. So another thing you got to understand is you set the pace and you set the tone, but you have to be willing to enforce it. You cannot just say, show up on time. You can't just remind them. It's like you get one warning. If it happens again, you're fired. It has to be that level of tolerance. It can't be, well, okay, he comes in late, but he's our best tech. See, that doesn't work. Because if they're not with the program, they gotta go. So you get what you tolerate. Perks are not a substitute for poor culture, and they don't motivate anybody to do a better job. Just like I was talking about Mark Randolph with the hot tub. They don't. In fact, often I think perks can attract the wrong type of employee. It's just like direct marketing. So if I do an ad and I say, register for the webinar, and everybody who registers gets a free iPad, right? That's an incredible offer. I'll probably get a lot of people to sign up. Will I get people who are signed up to want to buy the toolkit? No. Because the bait was they want the free iPad. That's what attracted them to the webinar, not come to this webinar and learn about how to improve sales in your business, right? So when you have a lot of perks in a business and you advertise that, I think it attracts the wrong kind of person. It attracts the kind of person who wants hot tubs and paid for lunches and big fat IRA contributions, and they want 4-day work weeks, and they want to have nap rooms and and game rooms, and that's. So I think, for me, I don't want to attract employees based on the perks. I want to attract employees based on the opportunity. I want to attract employees who want to be in a place where you're with other high achievers who don't tolerate BS, who don't tolerate mediocrity, who want to work on cool things. That's what I want to attract. So it should be irrelevant that we pay for lunch every day. I mean, that's a consideration, but you really want them focused on the job, right? I mean, so, another thing, sort of like this kind of goes in with trying to be nice and be liked and trying to do the right thing by your employees, I know that's why you're doing it, but it often backfires and doesn't have the effect. Now, that's not to say, again, that you shouldn't reward good employees and give perks, but it should be based on performance, not just because you work here. Does that make sense? Okay. Other thing is trust your gut. If someone doesn't pass the smell test in an interview, or if they work for you for a while and you're starting to get a sense that they're kind of turning sour, trust your gut. There's something wrong. If you get a sense that they're becoming disgruntled, that they're starting to moonlight, that something is wrong, trust your gut. Most of you are so busy, like you know it deep down, but you just kind of ignore it because you don't want to deal with it. And I understand because I've been in the same position, but trust your gut. In the interview process, if there's one little thing that they do that just kind of irritated you, like there's a guy who just applied for a job sales job. And so I give instructions. So I say, submit your resume and please answer these 3 questions. One is, tell me what you're really good at, and tell me what you don't like to do and don't want to do. The second one is, what are you looking for in your next job? What's most important to you? And the third one is, tell me about specifics about your abilities and your accomplishments as it relates to sales, right? They're like 3 questions. So I give them a little task to see if they can do it. And I say, please send your resume with the answers to these 3 questions to me and copy Kathy, who is my assistant, who will then get you on my calendar. So Kathy doesn't schedule anything until we get that email back, which eliminates some people right there, right? If they can't follow that simple instruction, they're not even considered. So this doofus emails me and gets Kathy's email wrong, and all he has to do is cut and paste. I mean, this is not like hard, right? It's Kathy, Kathy. It's there, you can cut and paste. And not only that, but then he sends a second email going, oh, this came back undeliverable, apparently. I don't know how to type an email. But the second time he sent it, again, he got Kathy's email wrong. So, right there, that's a sign, right? I'm not hiring somebody who can't get a simple task correct, all right? And again, when you're doing interviews, you're going to have to look at 1,000 people before you find one. Right? You got to be that picky. That's why you got to be recruiting all the time. They're not your friends or family. You can be friendly with them. You can support them, but just they are not your friends. They are not your family. And I say that, and I feel like I feel bad because like Jeff is sitting there and Mark's sitting there, and I actually trust Jeff and Mark more than most of my family members. Like honestly, I do. But I'm just saying I'm using that as a more general term, if you will. There are some employees that will become so essential to you. Like Nicole, if God forbid something happened to my husband and I would want Nicole to raise my kids. That's the level of trust and respect I have for her. So I don't mean that in the sense that they're not your friends or family, but in general, because you do need a few key people on your team that are like that, But you got to understand, they're number one, they're looking out for themselves, and you can't blame them for that. They want more money, they want more opportunity, they want a good place to work. So they are going to make decisions that are in their best interest, and you can't fault them for that, right? So all the times that you helped them out and you did nice things, if you do it, which is my next point, be generous, but never have any expectations of receiving thanks or reciprocity. And this is a big one. Always give without expectation of generosity back. So if you decide to give somebody a bonus because they're having a tough time in their life and you want to help them out, that's great. But don't ever think for 1 second that then they owe you, because that's not how this works, right? My best story about this is I had an employee, this is years ago. I had an employee who was not performing well, who was very disruptive, who had a lot of drama, and I told her we need to separate ways. I said, look, I need to fire you, and she cried and said, this is the worst thing. I've got all these bills. I've got medical bills. I've got all these things. This is the worst thing ever, and I felt bad. So what I said, look, here's what I'll do. Stupid. By the way, never underestimate the stupidity of yourself, right? What was it? Einstein said there's 2 things that he's absolutely sure about, and that's the infinity of the universe and human stupidity. And he's not so sure about the universe, right? But the human stupidity. So, so this was me, big stupid. I said, and what I'm saying is, go ahead and laugh at me. I said, look, as long as you're not disruptive, and by the way, the reason I'm firing her is because she's disruptive, but if you do not cause any problems, I'll let you stay and work, and you can even go interview on other jobs, as long as you're doing your work, as long as you're not disrupting anybody, either until you find another job or until I replace you, because I didn't have a replacement right then and there. So we agreed to that. Now, what she then proceeded to do was turn every employee against me. She stole my client list, sold it to a competitor, quit, went to work for the competitor, who then was marketing to all of my clients. And I know because I suddenly got a barrage of emails going, did you see this? Did you see this? Did you see this? Right? Which I then had to get a cease and desist. I had to sue them. They countersued for defamation, which didn't make any sense. It's like, here's a tactic. What some lawyers will do is they countersue with some kind of bullshit thing. And then they try to use it as a bargaining chip, but it doesn't matter. You still got to deal with 2 lawsuits, and now you've got this. Caused a big disruption, lost a lot of revenue over this, just from the attorneys, from the attorney fees, from the clients getting caught in the crossfire, from, because they're telling everybody Robin's this bully and she's, all this stuff. So I'm telling you, be generous, but don't expect that if you're generous, then they're going to reciprocate. Stop trying to be liked. Again, it's not your job to make your employees happy either. All right? It is not your job to make them happy. That is their job. That is their choice. Now, some straight talk about you. Now that we're talking about employees, you've got to learn to hire, manage, and lead. It's the only way to grow a company beyond a tech with helpers. I don't care how good you are, you can only bootstrap and renegade to a certain point before you break. And I think most of you in here, one of the reasons you're not growing is not because you don't know how to do marketing, like Colin was saying. It's not because you don't know what to do. It's you just can't get the time to do it. And that's because you still have too much on your plate. I think that's like the biggest reason, really. You're not dumb. You people in here are not dumb. I mean, you're in Producers Club. I know you know this stuff. But you're still trying to do all the sales and do all the marketing and all the tech help. You need to start looking and investing in higher quality people and go out and start finding those people who can take big chunks of management off your plate. All right? So you got to do it whether you like it or not. You got to lead by example. Again, you cannot be giving yourself timeouts and I'll get to it laters and I'm going to come in late and I'm going to half-ass a project, because in our team we set goals as a company and I state what my goals are, and they're not easy goals. You don't want to give yourself a cakewalk like, oh, I'll get a newsletter out. That's a bullshit goal, right? It's got to be a tough one, and you got to put it out there for your employees, and you got to report to them every week, just like you asked for them to do that to you. You want to be held accountable? Be accountable to each other as a team and your employees. They want to see you working. They want to see you improving. They want to see you doing those things. So keep in mind, you got to lead by example. And it's not your job to motivate them either. Another thing, people come to me and they say, how do you motivate your salespeople? How do you motivate your employees? And the answer is you don't. Mike Ditka said this at boot camp years ago, if you remember. And I think it was John Matazzi who asked the question. John said, or I think it was John, or somebody said something to the effect about how do you motivate your players to win? And without skipping a beat, he said, we don't motivate. If they need motivation, they're cut from the team. And see, that's a really good line. And when he said it, I wrote it down and I never forgot it. If they need motivation, they need to be cut from the team. It is not your job to motivate them. Now, you can incentivize them. That's good. Salespeople, money-driven. Hey, you do this, we give you a little more money. That's the kind of motivation. But doing pep talks and trying to, make them feel better and hang motivational posters in the hallways and that kind of bullshit, forget it. Right? That's not your job. But I will say it is your job not to demotivate them. And demotivating them is giving them a goal, or more important, not giving them goals, not giving clear instructions, harassing them about things that you've not coached them about. Right? Nobody likes to get a speeding ticket when there's been no speeding sign posted. Right? So you can't get mad at them if you didn't give them clear instructions. So that will demotivate them. And also, don't be cheap. Hire top performers for key roles and compensate them really well. All right? And you never want to lose an employee for a couple $1,000. Right? You want to try to engineer your pricing strategy and your profitability so that you can pay slightly more than the market average. Like for appointment setters, the average telemarketer in Nashville earns about $35,000 a year, $40,000, somewhere in there. Our on-target earnings is $52,000. Right? So they all hit it? No, but they have to be 100%. But they typically land somewhere between, somewhere around 45, right? So far, because actually the truth of the matter is some of them actually were on that, and those people we promoted up. So don't be cheap. Hire top performers and compensate them well. And you got to clarify the roles, responsibilities, standards, and then be willing to enforce them. So don't just create a scorecard and then never look at it with them. Create a scorecard and go through it with them. And once a quarter, here's a good practice. We were talking about this yesterday. Here's a good practice. Once a quarter, when you meet with your team, have them, prior to coming to the meeting, tell them, go look at your scorecard and come to the meeting with anything you feel that you're doing that needs to be added on there, that you've started doing or you think you should be doing. And then bring to the meeting anything you feel like you should not be doing, or you've stopped doing, or you're not doing well. And then we as a company, we can decide, do we need to hire somebody to take some of these roles off? Do we need to give some support? Maybe we need to stop doing things. Make them own their scorecard, but you gotta have it. You gotta make sure that you enforce compliance of the scorecard. And so one of the things, I had an employee once I had to let go, and she just wasn't doing her scorecard, and we told her, you're not performing your job on the scorecard as outlined. And when we let her go, she says, I don't even know where my scorecard is. That was her bullshit excuse, which she could not use as an excuse. But so that's why I implemented once a quarter. It's their job to look at it. So it's now in my company, it's the employee's job to own their scorecard. Once I create it, and I co-create it with them, because when I hired Will, who's now running MSP Success Magazine, I outlined it. I said, here's the results, here's the revenue you have to produce. There's certain things like, hey, if I hire you and pay you this is what I need. That's for me. But then the rest of it was kind of like setting goals. I outlined it, and then I sat down with them and said, tell me what makes sense. Tell me what doesn't make sense. Let's discuss it. And that way, they're involved in creating their job role, and then they're involved in owning it as well. So that's something that's worked really well for me. Now, this slide and this segment you might want to show to your employees, because I'm going to take a minute and talk to the employees. I don't know if there's any here, but I know that I think it's worthwhile for me to kind of say this to them, because it's like Megan and I were talking the other day. If you have kids, they misbehave for you, they're out of control, right? The minute they go to school, the minute they go to a friend, they're angels, right? Like last night, if you saw my two lunatics who were high on sugar and knowing they're going to Disney tomorrow, they were running around like crazy people. And so I found come here. No, come here. Stop it. No, come here. And I finally was like, all right, we're going to play a game. You stand in this square, Jamie, and Emily, you stand in this square, and anybody who steps outside the square is a loser, right? Thinking that'll keep them. So Jamie's like, I'm not standing in the square. You know what I mean? So, it's like that kind of behavior, right? So sometimes somebody else telling them, like Miss Wendy can come up, or, Scott Beck can come up and talk to them, and they're just so perfect, And it's weird that way, right? Sometimes you have that, you're the idiot because you're the boss and you're around all the time. So sometimes somebody else saying this to your employees makes it stick. So that's why I put this slide in here to talk to you a little bit. So you could take this back and show your employees.